And we're back for another episode of your favorite podcast, Petty Daydreams. Every week we break it down, we talk with a guest, or we talk about a specific topic I feel is relevant to women. Then we give advice to a listener, and then we close it with your favorite hot takes. So this week we have on guest Monica Nguyen of Chic Education. You probably heard of her if you're either in the Oklahoma City fashion scene or into sustainable fashion. We have a great discussion for you guys, and I'm actually going to keep this intro pretty short because, as with all my guests, we usually get into a really good conversation and it goes a little bit over what I had allotted. So for the interest of keeping everything pretty short for this episode so you can listen to it in one sitting, I'm going to keep this part short. Like I said already, here I am already doubling up on time. But if you've been affected by the cold front this week, I hope you find somewhere cozy. Maybe you're driving somewhere and it's raining and it's just like setting the mood for this podcast. Just remember to leave a review of this podcast on Apple. It helps with charts, helps with everything. If you like the episode, tag me in your story while you're listening. You can share it from Spotify directly to your Instagram stories. I would really appreciate hearing how you feel about the podcast so far and letting your friends know how you feel about it. All that to say, let's get right into the interview. I hope you love this as much as I loved recording it. And yeah, that's it. So let's do this thing. Okay, guys, so now I have my guest on. Monica, it's so nice to be talking with you, even though we're online. Thanks for coming on Petty Daydreams today. How are you doing?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing great. I'm enjoying a long weekend for Labor Day, so I'm just trying to relax.
I feel you on that. So I actually had a request, which was so funny because we had already arranged our interview before somebody was like, hey, I want to hear from an Oklahoma City-based like style blogger, fashion blogger. It's so weird. I came across your account. I was like looking on the hashtag OKC blogger, which is a good way to like find people to connect with, see like what else is going on. And I'm not really like a fashion blogger, so to say, but like in your niche. So like OKC blogger. And so I've really just enjoyed like having an online friendship of sorts because this year is like so weird. But I really enjoy your content and everything. I have been curious. So how long have you lived in Oklahoma City? And then what do you do here?
I have been in Oklahoma City my entire life, so I know it pretty well. And I am a high school English teacher full time.
That's awesome. Living here in Oklahoma City all this time, you've seen a lot of change happen then.
Oh, for sure. I mean, there are areas in the city that I can remember from my childhood where there was nothing there, and now it's been fully developed and continually being developed. And it's just wild to think about because in the grand scope of things, we're a pretty small city. Or at least people still think we ride horses and things like that. But I've witnessed it grow into this massive thing, and it's just been really incredible to watch. But I do like that we still, in some ways, have this like small town atmosphere, if you know what I mean, with like a lot of local businesses and things like that, and a tight-knit community.
So you live in Oklahoma City and you've always been here. I think that's so cool because I think a lot of people don't really think of Oklahoma City as like being very artistic or having people who blog. And so you run an account that's based on like sustainable fashion. You thrift a lot. You make looks that aren't just fast fashion. Will you tell my listeners a little bit more about what Chic Education is?
So I made a turn for sustainability, particularly with fashion, almost 2 years ago. I actually just posted a throwback photo and I was reflecting upon that change because it hadn't happened when I posted that photo. Now I'm looking at this journey that I've gone through, and I can't believe it's already been this long, because I feel like it's been going on for a really long time, but it's actually been a really short time. I just started seeing a lot of research about fast fashion and mass consumerism and how that's negatively affected the environment. I actually became a pescatarian about 6 years ago for conscious reasons. And so in my life, I've been trying to change little bit by little bit different habits that I have that I feel like are affecting things outside of myself. And fashion has always been something near and dear to my heart. And I started noticing this trend where, particularly on social media, where we felt this need to constantly buy into the newest trends, try to make money off of the newest trends, things like that. And at some point, I even thought about monetizing my account, much like the classic bloggers have done in the past. But then it started to sit on my heart, and I realized this isn't exactly what I wanted. It didn't feel authentic to myself. It felt like a job. It felt forced. And then I was reflecting on the negative impact I was making in general, and I started making a huge turn, and it was a big change for me. And I know it's a big change for a lot of people. So I thought, why not start documenting this journey and seeing if people felt the same as I did, and just seeing how we could all change and morph and just be a little bit more conscious with our lifestyles. So I started posting my journey, and it's been really cool because I've met so many people in this community, this ever growing community that I didn't even know existed, until about a year ago, or a year and a half ago now. And it's just been really fun because this community has made it a lot easier for me to change. And so I felt like that was the platform I wanted to have. So essentially, I want to normalize sustainable fashion. I don't want to try, I don't want it to be a total effort. I want people to see that it can happen with just a few changes in your life, and that you can be inspired by people who are doing this without feeling pressured to do it yourself. You know what I mean? I want it to be casual.
Yeah, I think some people think it's like this. I don't know, because, okay, being green and sustainable fashion was something like, oh, I'd go thrift, I'd go find maybe brands that support sustainable practices or whatever like that. But now it's also being shifted towards this like luxury side almost, where it's being made unattainable again. So I think people are thinking, oh, well, I'd like to be more sustainable in my clothing, but it costs too much, even though at the same time, some people think like, oh, it's actually cheaper or whatever else because you
Mm-hmm.
can find, secondhand clothing or something like that. It's just like a weird dichotomy,
It,
honestly.
it absolutely is. And I think that's one of the things that's really confusing about it, because there's a lot going on, particularly with what we call greenwashing. So bigger fast fashion industries are trying to essentially make money off of this new wave of people trying to be more conscious, and that's not very fair. And the reality is that being able to be sustainable and make that choice is inherently a privilege, because there are plenty of people who have to shop that way, to have to go to the thrift store or discount stores and things like that to shop, right? So when other people like me who have a normal life get to choose that, it is a privilege that we have to be aware of, that I can invest in more quality pieces from green companies, right? Whereas a lot of people can't afford that, or can't afford that right now. So it is kind of a mixed bag. And so as I tried to post, I have to think about my teaching background and the fact that a lot of young people follow me, and they probably are falling more into the category of, well, I can't really afford that right now. And so I try to mix both. I do thrifting, I do vintage shopping, and I do investment shopping. So I try to touch on a little bit for everyone, to try to show people what options you really have. But ultimately, the best thing to do is just use what you already have. And I think that that's something, especially with social media, that people have gotten away from, because that pressure of like, don't repeat outfits, right? Like, don't post the same thing over and over again. And I had to get over that mindset too. And now that I have, I've never felt more authentic to myself. So that could be a way to also normalize the situation and make it more attainable for most. But I agree. It's definitely something that in some ways can be so far out of your comfort zone or your ability. So I'm trying to provide ways for people to think about it and apply it to their lives the best they can.
I mean, you bring up a lot of good points. I mean, the privilege aspect, this idea too, I really like that you make it casual, like you described it. Like, it doesn't have to be something that is entirely contrived all of the time, where it's like about wearing what you own. And then you brought up like investment shopping. So you see, you said there's like three tenets to it, like investment shopping, thrifting, and then vintage. Can you like explain the difference between those and like what they are?
Right. So if we're going to go from like bottom top, right, as far as economically, what you can probably afford. So classically, sustainable clothing comes from the thrift store, right? Everybody knows secondhand. You go to the thrift store, you go and find treasures, and that in and of itself has become a trend, right? Um, and that definitely makes it more attainable. But it's also problematic because sizing issues, consistency of clothing and options, that makes it kind of difficult for people, and it might turn them away because they don't have time to sit there and go through racks and things like that. But that's usually where people go when it comes to sustainability. The next tier is going into like vintage shops. That's going to be more expensive. So mostly online. That's where I found a ton of vintage shops now, kind of like boutique, I guess, secondhand, where you have these owners who go and find those pieces for you, essentially, and then they post it on their sites and make that a little bit more accessible as far as like, oh, you can check sizes very easily. They pick the good stuff for you and they post it. Price range, though, because of those efforts, goes up substantially from a thrift price, right? So that might be something better for those people who kind of struggle with thrifting. Then you have full-blown investment. Now that can kind of overlap with the vintage shops. They might have higher quality vintage pieces that are in fantastic condition that you're going to spend more money on. There's also slow fashion companies who do like made to order clothes and things like that. And those are going to be quite hefty because of the efforts put in to make sure that it is sustainable. Oftentimes they're handmade. Oftentimes they have to keep their operations very, very small, and therefore their prices go up. Those are what I would call investment pieces. You're going to spend a substantial amount of money on one or two pieces that you might be able to thrift after numerous trips for substantially less, right? But that also guarantees the size range that you probably need, right? Or the particular item that you're looking for. So it's kind of tiered in that way, with many different things in between. Other more affordable options that I shop through constantly are websites like ThredUp or apps like Poshmark and Depop or Etsy. But those prices can range from the low to the high because you can always find like designer pieces on those places as well. So there is a broad range of shopping options when it comes to sustainability, and I think that that can probably also be overwhelming for people.
I like how you break it down into like three tiers. Because I think about investment pieces, but I'm still buying from places that are not necessarily focused on their environmental impact or like even the conditions for their workers, which is a whole other part of the fast fashion side of things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's interesting. I mean, like thinking about investment shopping too, it's like you're sharing the costs with the producer, and like I guess more of the costs are offset onto the consumer, but you're also being a conscientious consumer. Like a lot of fast fashion, like you talk about big places you can go in the mall, stuff like that. It's,
Mm-hmm.
like you've got to think about like, I don't shop at like a couple stores because they have factories and sweatshops like in Malaysia or wherever else, and they have children making clothes. And
Right.
I like this part of it where you can remove that kind of thing, like, the negative effects of fast fashion or, the consumerism, the capitalism aspects of this, and do things in a way that, you're actually making a bigger change than you think and a bigger impact than you think.
Oh, absolutely. It's a drop in the bucket, really, for the effects that you have, both negatively or positively. And that can be a lot for some people too, and be a turnoff. But as you make these slow steps, you have to be mindful of what positivity you can be bringing that you weren't even aware of before. And so I'm always working to research and things like that. But I'm not going to say that I absolutely kill myself on these things either. I am by no means perfect on this. There are definitely more quote unquote green companies that still might use materials or things that are impactful to the environment, or potentially still being based internationally, and you might not know a lot about their company. So it's just a growing process, I think, for everyone. But I think it's easier to start walking that path than a lot of people think it is. And I hope that the things that I create helps people to take that journey.
I mean, so I think something that you do that makes a big impact is you take these pieces that people would otherwise be like, well, I don't know how to style what's in my closet, or I've already worn it this way before. You're kind of telling them to like infuse creativity into thinking about what you wear. Like you can wear something 100 different ways. You've just got to like put a little effort in almost. But on this other side of it, you're saying that it doesn't have to be perfect. Like you said, you're not perfect, but making small changes will have like a ripple effect that you may not be aware of. But you shouldn't get caught up on the whole idea of, well, I have to do it exactly this way or this way in order to, live with more sustainable fashion principles in my life.
Absolutely. I feel like there are people in every situation that are quick to judge or be aggressive towards people if they're not reaching those levels. And that turns people away, right, from wanting to make that effort. And so I believe everything, all habits, everything you do, it has to come from a slow growth perspective, like a little bit at a time. That's the only way that you can really make it into your lifestyle. Like I didn't just dive into this overnight. It was a process, and it was a difficult process. I had to let go of the convenience of it all, until I fell into a whole new routine. And now that I'm in this routine, from the outside, it might look like I have to do a lot more work to get what I want, right? But I've gotten so used to it that it doesn't even faze me anymore, right? That I have to sift through things more frequently than other people, that I have to be more patient when it comes to finding exactly what I want. But I've never felt more satisfied in the process than I have now. I don't have to look at my closet anymore and see things hanging there with brand new tags, and I never wear it. And then I have this regret later on of, oh, I bought this and this because I intended to wear it and I never did. I don't feel that guilt anymore. And so it's like little things like that you have to take as like small victories. And that's really the best way for you to change, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like making it a habit almost is, I mean, with anything, like if you're going to integrate anything into your life or make a life change, it's just about finding new ways of doing it and then just implementing it into your life. And then you get used to it.
Absolutely.
So you said about 2 years ago that that's when you made the change towards focusing more on like the sustainable fashion side. When did you start blogging about fashion? And then why? Why did you, I mean, you said you're passionate about fashion, but what gave you the idea to start blogging about what you were wearing?
I think that I started 2 or 3 years before that. I recall making an Instagram before Instagram was a thing. And when nobody had followers, there was no such thing as hashtags. Like everybody filtered their photos with the Instagram filters. So I've had Instagram for a while. And then I started catching on at the boom of fashion bloggers when they really started to make way onto social media platforms. And so I thought, oh, that might be kind of fun. I've always liked my outfits. I've always liked talking to people about it. I feel inspired by other people. Like maybe I can do this. So I started loosely doing things over time. Definitely had a different mindset then. I was seeking growth. I was wanting to reach these heights that these bloggers were hitting. And so I would post outfit of the days essentially pretty frequently. And even just until a couple of years ago, that was the majority of my content. It was just like me standing somewhere and someone takes a photo of me. Like there wasn't a lot of effort in it at all. I did actually start a blog at some point, and I was hoping to make it very teacher and fashion based. That's actually where like my username came from, was the concept of merging those things together. And now I feel like it's morphed into something totally different and still applicable. Like this idea of educating on fashion, which was my original concept, but now it's educating on fashion in a different realm on a new level. So I've had a little bit of a journey here, but by no means have I ever hit it big. And now that I'm looking at it, I don't know that I really want to. I like the small little following that I have and the community that I have. It just makes things so much more personable and personal, and just kind of keeps me going.
I mean, something that's also worthwhile to say is, I mean, your follower count, which is not like follower counts really matter. Some people use that as a metric for success or whatever. But like what you have right now, some people might be really pushing and grinding, trying to get to that same level of so-called success or whatever like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's always just important to remember like your what you've met is somebody else's dream, and then like somebody else what they've achieved like in terms of like their content or whatever, like they were in your shoes one day. But like your whole talking about like you started out is, I was going to ask like where did Chic Education, the name, come from?
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad you said that name. I wonder if it has to do with like teaching or like teaching people about this, because you know you're a teacher, which I've said that word like 5 times, but it's like one of those things that a lesson in branding and rebranding. Like you started out as one thing and kind of gradually grew into something else, which I think is so cool that you could still keep the same name too.
Yeah, it's a metamorphosis, if you will. Just like my fashion journey has been, the name has followed along with it. And I like where this has gone. I've met so many amazing people in this process. As soon as I kind of picked that niche, they always tell you when you're wanting to grow your Instagram to choose a niche. And I think I was in the wrong one for a while because I didn't really have that community. I wasn't really making those connections. And it made me really sad. I felt like disconnected from the whole thing. And then I dove into this small little group of people, and it's just expanded from there, whether it's locally or online, whatever it is. It's just been really cool. And using, like you said, you found me on the OKC blogger hashtag. Using those kind of hashtags has brought me to people I never would have met before. You know, like we didn't run in the same circles. We didn't have any mutual connections. And then I found that mutual connection, and it's been really, really fun to bond with people with similar mindsets or people who just want to be there to support, like I don't judge people who don't follow my lifestyle. That is one thing that I really work hard not to do because I've seen people do that. I still connect with anybody regardless of where they are on things. And I think that's kind of what somebody who wants to be where I am needs to focus on. Like, what's your purpose? My purpose is to be inspired and inspire others and making connections on the way. Like, that's the nitty gritty basis of what I'm doing. And so if it's numbers for you, I mean, you can follow that, but it's not going to give you that same fulfillment. I have befriended people who had massive amounts more of numbers than I did, and they didn't have that fulfillment. They felt disconnected from their followers. Their engagement wasn't very high, or at least wasn't very authentic, and they lost their sense of purpose because of it. So I would say that my driving force has definitely been my ability to meet other people who in some level connect with me.
I mean, that's a huge lesson right there for anybody that was like, I don't know if anybody's listening that's like, oh, I wonder how she does this, whatever, how's the sausage made, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's like one of those things, a lot of people say or express that they're like dissatisfied with like the whole process of even just like posting content and like the lack of response they get. I mean, maybe your niche that you're creating within has to align with your purpose. I mean, that would make a lot of sense.
Absolutely. I know that especially with like past Instagram algorithms, it's been really easy for people to just like want to hit it big to end up on the explore page because that's how it used to be, right? Where you had to have those huge numbers to show up there and get more exposure, so on and so forth. And I'm not going to lie, I still fall back on some of those issues whenever I look at numbers and like a post bombs or something like that. I can't help but feel a little disappointed because I put myself into it, what I make, and for it to not go anywhere or for people to not have as big of a reaction. It is kind of disheartening from time to time, but you kind of have to check yourself on that and say, you know what? You did what you wanted to do. You felt proud of it. You should still be proud of it, no matter what the reaction is or how much exposure you get, because there are so many things about that you cannot control. And I'd rather continue to do what I want to do and what I feel good about than try to adjust to things that I cannot control.
I mean, that's an amazing attitude. I wish I could take some of your attitude and apply it to myself sometimes. Because I think that's the struggle when you're in a digital world. I think there's all these like expectations that are like so hard to meet. And then we like put them on ourselves. So like just enjoying what you're doing. I mean, isn't that what it's all about when you're creating anything? We just get so detached from that.
Yes, I agree.
So what is your philosophy behind styling? Whenever you sit down and plan what you're going to wear and then post later, like how does that work for you? Like, what is your process?
Honestly, point A is when you're looking at things to purchase or add to your wardrobe. And for me, if you can't envision yourself wearing it at least 3 different ways, then you don't need to get it. So my clothes that I have, especially now, have already fulfilled that in my mind. Like that was the first test before I even went there and purchased it or traded for it or whatever it is. Like I have to have that mindset already there. And then when I look at my clothes, it makes it easier because I had already had a forethought with it. So it cuts down on a lot of those issues where you just like have things hanging there. If I really want to make content, say I get a new piece or something like that, I will literally just start pulling things out of my closet that I think might go with it. And I just like start throwing it on. And I'll end up making this gigantic pile on my bed of like discarded clothes. I'll take pictures just in my mirror of the outfits that I like. And then I just go from there. If I hit it big, I'm like, oh, yes, this is it. This is what I want to post. But that's kind of a driving force. Also, I save so much inspo. I'm always on Instagram myself, not just to post my own content, but to look at other people's. And I love the save feature on Instagram. Like I have it like a Pinterest board. I never got really big on Pinterest, but I did get huge on it on Instagram because it was just so convenient to hit the little tab. So I also have like a clothes or like outfits folder on Instagram that I'll scroll through when I'm in a rut. And I go, oh yeah, I wanted to recreate this, or oh, I had a vision for something similar. And that also helps that process of styling.
Gotcha. I think a lot of people really get hung up on the idea generation part of it. Saving stuff on Instagram is a great way to do it. And then I like what you say, like when you're buying things, make sure you can style them at least 3 different ways. I don't think people are considering that sometimes. And I think that's like also part of the purpose of fast fashion. Like just buy a lot of different things, also because they're priced relatively cheap, and then don't really think about it later.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I mean, any exclusions I would make would be like the really special pieces, those wild cards that you have to have, or, certain event level things, like obviously you can't do that with an evening gown or something like that.
Yeah.
But if you can, as frequently as you can, that's going to help you in so many ways. It's going to help you from getting in those ruts later on. It's going to help you from wasting your money and your time and energy into it. And then coincidentally, also helping with the waste and mass consumerism in society. So just something as simple like that can guide you into the direction that I'm kind of pushing for.
So what kind of content do you feel like all fashion bloggers need to incorporate into their feed?
I have found that my most successful posts or stories or anything are always the ones that are super personal. What I've learned during quarantine and things like that, when I had to do a lot of my content by myself in my home, is that that's what people are looking for, is that real connection. Like I love it too when I look at someone's account and I feel like, oh yeah, we're friends, or I would totally be your friend in real life. Like those are the bloggers or the influencers or content creators, whatever you want to call it, that I follow most, that I have the most buy-in to. And so I think people need to remember that. Like, of course, I love doing really artsy, beautiful work with, my photographer friends or fellow creatives in the city. But ultimately, where I get the most reaction is when I do things just by myself. And I was actually shocked by that because that kind of goes against everything I thought it was in the beginning.
So how would you go about applying that?
I would say just letting go of some of those fears that you have of other people's opinions. Like, who are you really? Right. And when you're creating things, don't digress from that. Just do what feels right for yourself. So if you're in a kind of a sassy mood and you want to make a sarcastic caption for your photo, do it. If you want to go into a long rant about how you feel about something, do it. Because you'll be surprised as to how many people actually felt the same way as you. Like recently, I kind of avoided posting about my health particularly, or my skin issues, kind of like my insecurities, because that wasn't the most flattering thing, right? But I just decided to do it because I had seen other people talk about their problems and connecting with people with similar issues. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. I can't figure out what's going on. maybe other people have felt the same way or experienced the same thing. So I just like went ahead and did it. I just pulled the stops and decided I'm just going to open up and be real and post content with no filter, no script, nothing, just me talking. And I got a flood of messages as soon as I started talking about the skin issue that I was having from other people who had the same issue or who were in similar situations. And whether they could offer advice or not, it was just nice to know that you weren't alone. So I think really opening yourself up, that's really what's going to get you authentic followings and authentic growth.
I mean, and you talked earlier about fulfillment. That's what's going to come from being open or being quote unquote vulnerable. You're going to get people who feel like you're accessible and want to start a conversation with you, which is kind of like the whole point.
Right. And I'm not saying you have to be a totally open book, because I'm not. That is definitely something I learned in the classroom too. Like, I connect with my students, but I have set boundaries. And some of them would chuckle and tell you that it's true. Like, they'll try to push and try to get more out of me, but I have a very strong professional boundary that I've set. And I kind of follow that on social media as well. I don't just totally open up about everything. Some people do, and that is totally their prerogative. And I support you in that. That's just not what it is for me. And it's probably not that way for a lot of people. So I don't think that you need to constantly just like put yourself out there like that, But I think that it definitely helps to show those moments of, like you said, vulnerability, and that really will draw people in, and mostly in a good way. I am yet to get any negative feedback, and I'm very fortunate in that. And I know that a lot of people do receive negative comments and things like that, and it's not fair. But I believe in my heart that you'll see more positivity come out of it that will override the negatives.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just being online. Sometimes it's like you were saying, you can't really control it or expect everything that's going to come. Like, you can't really plan for it. So like, just being on the internet, there's going to be some people that have negative feedback. There's going to be people that have positive feedback. And ultimately, like, what you choose to do. I mean, you're in control of the whole situation. You can put as much out there of your life as you want to, or you can have a privacy boundary if that's what's good for you.
Absolutely. And so I think that's ultimately the most important part. What is going to be the best thing for yourself?
Yeah. I wanted to kind of switch gears. So everything's been going on this year, like literally everything. People have bingo cards for like what's going to happen next. Remember, it wasn't that long ago. It was like 2 months. We had Blackout Tuesday. So there were a lot of bloggers, influencers that posted a black square with the hashtag and haven't posted anything about Black Lives Matter since. So kind of what you're doing, I kind of feel is almost activist in a certain way. But would you feel like the people that did that, that's kind of like a version of passive activism?
I would absolutely agree that it is passive activism. Am I going to be quick to demonize these people? No, but let's call a spade a spade. Like I said previously, you don't have to share all of your views, your opinions, your beliefs on social media if you don't want to. However, as someone who has a public platform, if you are making the choice to make that bold of a statement, right? That's what the black square was intended to be. Then you are essentially opening up this discussion, right? And telling the world that I'm open to this discussion. But if you have no follow through, then you're basically telling the world that you started the conversation, but you don't really want to talk about it. And I'm not saying that you need to be able to debate things or constantly post about that, because I don't. I've shared things from time to time, and I believe that I don't have to constantly say it and still feel it and still do the work on my own personally. And that's my view of things. But as somebody who has a public platform, if you're going to put yourself out there, you need to be prepared to continue that discussion in some way, right? So I think that's the double-edged sword of social media, and particularly when it comes to social movements or politics and things like that. Sometimes it can be a positive thing and sometimes it can be a negative thing. But ultimately, if you're going to have a public platform, you need to be mindful of the impact that you're making and what you're putting out there. I actually had posted one of the squares, or one of the versions of the square. And then I realized the negative impact that it was having on the community, because it ended up flooding the BLM hashtags. And so, again, the vulnerability, I deleted that square and I explained to my followings that I didn't feel right in doing it because it was having a negative effect. And I hope that people are more considerate of that. But that square just kind of went crazy, and it ended up representing so many things. But ultimately, yes, I do believe that that is passive activism. And I think that passive activism can be kind of detrimental to the movement itself. Again, to clarify, do I think when people kind of stay quiet about things, do I think that that's passive? Not necessarily. Like I said, you don't know what work they're doing in their own personal life. That's not being broadcasted, right? But if you're going to make the movement to put it online, I think that you should have some kind of follow through.
I mean, I think that's 100% spot on. We kind of live in this time too that if you're going to say something and act like you're part of something, you have people that expect, like, it could be a small percentage or a large percentage, but you have people that expect you to walk the walk if you're going to talk the talk. And that can be a good thing, people holding people accountable, and it can be really destructive at the same time.
Right.
But as we see, like social media, content creation, it all gets kind of, I don't know, muddled with this whole internet activism aspect, which we saw way back in 2012 with Coney 2012 and all that stuff. I think you bring up a lot of really good points. And it's also one of those things, like, you don't know what somebody is doing in their private life to become actively anti-racist, or how they support their communities that are part of Black Lives Matter or the Black community and stuff like that. So reserving judgment sometimes, and I don't know, there's such a delicate balance, and I think we're
Absolutely.
all very aware of that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, those are issues I battle with all the time. One of the things that I don't believe in is cancel culture. And I know that's probably going to upset some people, but I'm looking at it from my educational point of view.
Yeah.
In my own classroom, I'm always trying to promote critical thinking. I'm always trying to promote people to formulate their own opinion based off of their research. And I think that cancel culture, although maybe the intent was good, it has turned into a toxic situation where people are so quick to cut others off without the allowance of growth. And so when we talk about moments like that of passive activism and things like that, I know there are definitely plenty of people who would have just like cut that off and decided they're done with them and so on and so forth. And it doesn't give that opportunity of consideration for betterment. And I think that if we're going to learn anything from 2020, it should be to allow people to grow, because that's really the only way in the long term that we're going to have change.
I agree. Leaving room for growth, allowing others to grow, allowing other people to grow from their mistakes. Because nobody is 100% infallible. People are going to make mistakes in your own journey of becoming anti-racist. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to have pitfalls and stuff like that. And I mean, in anything, not even in anti-racism, like any kind of area that we need to learn more about other people that are somehow different from us. It's one of those things we've got to leave room for people to learn, because I think a lot of people get shut out when they feel like, I don't know, not that anything needs to be 100% welcoming, but like when they feel like they're getting criticized for not doing something the exact way somebody else expects it.
Absolutely. And that's going, like we've talked about, with any lifestyle change that you're trying to make. There are definitely people that ruin that for others who are really trying to do their best here, you know. So we kind of have to watch ourselves in this world and look at those situations and say, okay, no, that's not okay, but watch ourselves before we make a total emotional guttural reaction. Because like I said, even in the lifestyle that I have, I still follow plenty of people who by no means are green, but I still follow them. I don't pass judgment on them. I see them trying to make some level of effort, and I applaud them for that. And I would hope that they would want to have discussions to better themselves and continue to learn, because I think ultimately everybody needs to be open to educating themselves.
Yeah.
I actually had a really cool moment in my classroom the other day where I asked some of my seniors to rank X amount of things as least to most important. And on this list were life values. One of the terms was education. So many of these teenagers put education at the bottom
Oh.
because they saw that as like college and things like that. And that's not for everyone. I see that. I understand that. But I had one girl who put it on the board because I had them share out. And she was one of few who had ranked it high. And I said, can you, if you don't mind, can you tell us why did you put education so high? And she said, well, I didn't see it as like institutionalized education. I saw it as educating yourself always on things that are going on, things in the world, so on and so forth. And I was just like, wow, bravo. I wish people could walk away with that, because that's the core of everything, right? Is being open to educate yourself. And again, that doesn't have to mean like the traditional sit at a desk type of education. And we talked about that as a group, and how you actually learn so much more outside of the classroom, right? But you have to be willing to learn those things as well.
I mean, being receptive, and I think when you are in possession of some kind of knowledge that somebody else does not yet have, to check yourself when you're gatekeeping. And then you teach high school, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Gen Z just kind of freaking amazes me sometimes.
Yeah, they can be kind of scary sometimes, but they can also be quite hopeful. Um, yeah, it's really interesting to watch both the new generation, my generation. I'm a millennial.
Yeah.
We've had plenty of things said about our generation that was negative. We've also grown. Even the boomers have made progress in some way as well. But I think you're right. I mean, we are in those ways conscious gatekeepers. And in that way, we do have to watch ourselves and make sure that we're not shutting people off and cutting off their hope.
Yeah. Would you say that activism is part of your brand? I kind of just like, I don't know, that was my impression, but for anybody that's following you or any of my listeners, would
I
you
mean,
say that what you do is activism?
yes, in a way, and maybe in a not a traditional way, right? Because I think maybe when people think of activism, they think of extreme activism, right? Like go out, yell at people for not doing what you're doing kind of activism. I do go out there and I promote what I think is right. But one thing that I've always believed in is making sure that you're just not metaphorically shoving things down people's throats, as we like to say here. Um, I will promote what I believe in. I will feel good about that. But again, I am not quick to judge people who don't follow the same path as I do.
Yeah. Going down this route, which we've kind of gone in and out of, People that say that we should be holding corporations accountable with regards to like the environment and impact, stuff like that, instead of focusing so much on the consumer's responsibility. What do you think about that?
I think it has to be a balance of both. Like, I don't believe in any level of activism that you have to put everything on somebody else or also everything on yourself. I think it has to be a balance of both. I believe that you can't go pointing fingers and things like that if you aren't doing the things that you're suggesting that they do. You know what I mean? You have to check yourself. You have to make sure that you are actually living up to these beliefs that you have, right? And then in some ways to hold them accountable, whether that means not buying from them, not supporting them, things like that, or being more vocal, sending them letters and emails and phone calls and things like that. I think it has to be the balance of the two. But if you're going ahead and making changes in your own lifestyle, it will affect them in the long run, right? So it has to be, for me, a balance of both. Like I said, particularly with like sustainability in fashion, I'm just speaking on that because obviously that's what I do. I'm not going out there sending a bunch of angry letters to people. I have stopped buying from many companies that I used to buy from before, and I've made that lifestyle change for myself, and now I am in a place where I can go and verbalize to them what I think is right and wrong after practicing the lifestyle myself, after educating myself more and more. And now I feel like I can hold them accountable. So I think it has to be a balance of both. It can't just be an all or nothing kind of situation.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And then, you think about the bystander effect. If we're only saying that corporations can really make a change, we are ignoring a significant part of the change that could be made when you're basically giving yourself a pass. Like, well, I'm not really making that much of a difference because I'm not polluting rivers and stuff like that. I think there's a lot of power on that statement. It's got
Oh,
to be balanced.
oh, absolutely. I agree with that 100%. It would be so easy to fall into that trap if you're just spending your time pointing fingers at people and putting all of the accountability elsewhere. I think that that can be a very slippery slope that people can fall back on.
Yeah. In terms of all of this stuff, people are probably wondering, like, what are your favorite ways to shop sustainably here in Oklahoma City?
Oh, I have made so many friends locally that already had sustainable businesses prior to me even changing. Two of my best friends, I talk about them all the time on my social media. So shout out to Jesse and Anna. They own a rental clothing company in the Paseo called Library. And their concept is absolutely sustainable. So you get to rent clothes from them through a subscription service, and you get to go shop it just like you would any other clothing store. So you can go in there and try things on. You can't do that now, obviously, because of COVID restrictions, but you know what I mean. They're making sustainability accessible in a different way, right? It's kind of like having a gigantic closet with friends and you just kind of share your clothes together. And so I think that's a really fun and cool way to kind of like step your toe into sustainability without like too much of a commitment. If you rent clothes from them, it's not really occupying your closet. So you can try out pieces that might be a little bit out of your comfort zone or a little bit crazier than you usually have. And it's not going to sit in your closet and just be one of those things that you never grab. It could be something that you use in pictures. It could be something you wear in events or just to try out to see if you even like or don't like it. So I think that that's one of my favorite ways to be sustainable locally. I'm also friends with quite a few vintage sellers in our area. And my friend Dasha from Red Key Threads, she's actually opening a vintage shop in Midtown that will have numerous vintage vendors there who will have areas inside that you can shop in person. And she's doing some soft openings here next weekend. So I'm really excited to see what she has, and just a bunch of other sellers that I know locally, which I post about all the time. And if anybody's curious, I'll be glad to send you a list via DM or something on Instagram, because there's just so many people I would recommend. I also have befriended several sellers from other states who also have small businesses that I'll be glad to support, because I know that that's something very much important in Oklahoma City, both locally and just generally supporting small businesses.
And I think sometimes people, like, I'm going to ask you, so what is your suggestion on how to take the first step? I think it's great when you, like somebody like you post like, here's where I go. Because for some people, they just don't know where to look. So
Right.
it's really helpful. I mean, like Oklahoma City is kind of unique in that people, like I said, people call us like a flyover city or whatever. But like, there's a lot of people changing things up and making change on the local level. And it's as easy as trying out, like I'm pretty sure they still have like a trial or something like that. But like you could just do a trial period or just do the basic level of subscription for like the library, or you could check out one of these people that you like to work with. And it's as easy as that. Like that could be your first step.
Right. So suggestions that I have when you're kind of starting out is, if you are into more contemporary trendy pieces, always check like Poshmark or Depop or ThreadUp first, right? Because that has more of a familiar setup, right? It's online shopping. You can break it down by size. On Poshmark and Depop, you can search very specific items that you're looking for. On ThreadUp, you can do it by size, color, style, all of that. And that might help kind of move you into this mindset, right, of at least buying secondhand in that capacity. If you're wanting to go local, as soon as you start following and connecting with local people, like in my niche, I mean, it happens so fast. You'll end up meeting all kinds of other people because we're constantly promoting each other because we authentically believe in one another. And so it's been like a snowball effect for me where I start following one person who's kind of in that same niche, and then they start posting about other people and so on and so forth. And then I just reach out to them and start talking to them like, hey, I really like your style. Do you have any tips on like where you shop? My kind of friend date that I like to do with people are like thrift store shopping dates. So like anytime I meet people and they're like, oh yeah, I kind of want to get into this, like I will literally take you thrifting and we'll have a great time. We'll hit up a few Goodwills. I'll kind of show you what I do. So there are like so many different ways of which you can step into it. But I think number one is connecting with people who already do this, because they will be happy to guide you into that direction and help you take baby steps there.
I mean, that's excellent advice. I mean, in more ways than one, we're all really connected to other people, and all it takes is meeting somebody or asking somebody that very first question, which it can be a little bit intimidating sometimes, but like you said, people are more than happy to help.
I mean, honestly, especially in Oklahoma, I mean, like I said, we kind of have that like small town mentality, even on a large scale, because everybody knows somebody that knows that person. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
you're always surprised on how people know each other. So once you get those connections going, I mean, especially here, it just takes off on its own. Like, you don't even really have to put that much commitment to it. I promise you, if you walk into a library right now, you will befriend Jesse and Autumn immediately. I mean, they're just so welcoming on that. And they'll help guide you on other sellers that they know that are small businesses or sustainable businesses. One thing to consider is, even if you're struggling with sustainability, by just helping small businesses nearby, that in and of itself can also be sustainable, because you're investing into people who live in your area, who add to your local economy and take away from the mass consumerism. So that can also be like kind of an imperfect way of you walking into this lifestyle. It's just being kind of more considerate of where is your money going?
Yeah, and like we talked about habits, I mean, just shift your mindset a little bit. Think about it from be like a micro level. Just going to like the farmer's market is kind of like an equivalent way of thinking about this instead of the fashion side. There's ways to bring your dollar back into the local economy, and you may never directly see the effects of that, but it makes a change and it pays off to invest in local people and your neighborhood and your city.
Absolutely. I think that something people struggle with in our time is this need for instant gratification.
Yeah.
And the reality is, if you're going to make any type of lifestyle change, you have to accept that that's not going to happen. Like, that's not real. The internet, social media, everything has created that need and that comfort. But that's just the reality of life, is it's not instant.
Back to like Chic Education, your blog. Do you have any like personal growth goals for your blog this year?
I am really pushing right now to broaden my content and my creativity, and that's just like a personal desire that I have. I kind of want to push the boundaries a little bit more and see what I can come up with. Like I said, I learned a lot about myself during quarantine and what I'm capable of, and I'm eager to just kind of push that and do more and see what I can do. Because I'm not the most creative person. Like, I can't draw, I can't paint, I can't sing, I can't play any instrument. I can envision things. I have a hard time executing them with my hands. But I want to kind of push that in myself and see what I can provide that's not classic. And I have done well with like digital creation, and I want to continue to learn things. And on that note, I myself have actually reached out to people that inspire me or create things that I like. And I just ask them, hey, I really like maybe like your video editing. Can you give me some tips on how I can edit my stuff like that? And people were so quick to turn around and say, oh, yeah, this is what I do, and send me videos, voice memos, like full blown written instructions on what they do. So you just never know how you can push yourself by just like reaching out to others. But I think my goals just really come from watching other people and seeing what they're doing and wanting to do my own version of that.
And that's super cool. And you may say that like you're not as creative as other people, but like what you do is inherently creative. I think it's just a spirit in people to change things. I think that's where creativity kind of comes from. And to like influence the world around you with your innermost thoughts and your like perspective on things. So I definitely think you're doing that. And it's just good to know too, like if you want to imitate somebody or learn from what they're doing, like even if somebody doesn't respond back to you, sometimes they're going to. Like most of the time they probably will, and it's going to be a learning experience for both the person telling you how to do something and yourself. And I think that's what's really cool about the internet is it really does create this spirit of shared knowledge that has had huge implications on literally the fabric of society too, if you want to get down to it.
Absolutely. I think there can definitely be toxic sides of the internet and social media, but there are so many positive little pods of people out there, and you just got to find which one fits you, and it will be your driving force in so many ways, whether that's in your goals, the things that you create, your general mindset, whatever that is. You just got to find your little pod.
Yeah. Find your people.
Yes, absolutely.
So, is there anything like you were talking about, you really want to stretch the limits of your creativity and grow in different ways. Is there anything that people should be looking forward to in the next year? Maybe something you can tell us about, maybe a project you have on your mind?
I have been getting more opportunities for partnerships, and I will say that I have declined many that um, didn't connect with my beliefs
Yeah.
and where I want to go with what I'm doing. And so these partnerships, I hope, will continue to push those boundaries for me. And I can also gain more knowledge on the industry and things like that that I can share. So I'm really excited about that. My most recent partnership, and I'm always very open about it, so I don't have a problem sharing, is that I became an ambassador for ThreadUp. It's a place that I shop from all the time already, so nothing really changed about that. But it is cool because of this partnership. I have more accessibility to their products and things like that, so I can continue that conversation. So hopefully people will enjoy that and know that it's not like a sellout moment or anything
Yeah.
like that. It is totally on brand for me, and it's not a forced situation. It has naturally come about and just makes sense because I was already shopping with them. I was already promoting what they were doing. So I just hope that in the future, people are always looking forward to, like I said in the beginning, my normalization of this lifestyle and sharing the things that I learn on the way. I also hope that people learn through my posts that they can do it too if they wanted to. It doesn't matter how late in the game you feel that you are, that you can just dive in and do it.
I mean, that's a good message because anybody making a change, the biggest hurdle is just starting.
Right.
So I love that you're telling people like you can do it too. Like it's as easy or as hard as you want to make it, basically.
Right. Absolutely.
So is there anything specific that you want to share with my listeners or discuss further?
Um, like I said, honestly, if you want to make any type of lifestyle change, whether that's being more green or more conscious of the world's problems, step by step. I always have said it about all habits. You got to take a small step and then keep taking those small steps, and then it will just become easy over time. People always ask me how I did it, and they complain because they try and it's so hard. It was absolutely hard for me too. And it looks easy now because I'm in it and I've been in it, but I had to start somewhere, like we've said before. So just always keep that in mind. Every single one of us, no matter which type of lifestyle you're looking at, we had to start from somewhere. And like I said, support system is going to be the best thing for you. I started unfollowing accounts that didn't align with my vision and started following accounts that did. And even just a simple thing like that changed my mindset because I was always looking at what they were doing. I was always seeing the types of places they were buying from and so on and so forth. And it just made that accessibility so much easier and that transition a lot easier too. Because I could just like envision myself doing the same thing.
I mean, that's a very valuable takeaway for anybody that's wondering about this. So, say somebody's listening and they're like, I really want to connect with her. This sounds really awesome. Maybe I'm a teacher, maybe I am interested in sustainable fashion or blogging, whatever. How do you suggest that they get in contact with you?
Oh, you can always send me a DM on Instagram. I also have a little email button if you feel that that's a more appropriate place to have a conversation. But I'm always checking my messages when I can. So you can find me at chic_education on Instagram. And I will glad to be your virtual or in real life friend.
Well, I mean, thanks so much for coming on here. I've always really appreciated your accessibility and relatability, and I think you're doing really awesome work. I mean, there's not many people who can say that they are walking the walk like we talked about, and you're doing a lot for the whole sustainable fashion part of being sustainable. So thanks again for coming on. And I know She is as awesome as she sounds on here. So please reach out to her, follow her, get some ideas for ways you can implement this into your life. You're just great. And I'm really glad that we became internet friends and you came on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me. This has been so much fun. This is my first podcast ever, so I apologize if I was all over the place. I do love to talk when I can. So thank you again for having me. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts and feelings into the world and to promote what I believe in.
Thank you so much, Monica. And guys, like she said, her Instagram is chic_education. All right. Well, I'll talk to you later then.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so was that a great interview or what? If you want to find out more about her, like she said, go to Chic Education on Instagram, reach out, talk to her, ask her questions, start your journey if you're interested in being or leading a more sustainable lifestyle. And now we're going to go ahead and give advice. I'm going to keep this pretty short. Luckily, this is an advice query that's not going to take too much time. But basically, the listener said, "Hey, Bobbie, I am trying to lessen my anxiety. I have it just pop up every once in a while, panic attacks out of nowhere. I am really struggling to try and get it under control. So what do you do?" So, I mean, I'm pretty open with this. I have anxiety, depression, OCD. Apparently OCD is an anxiety disorder. My life for a long time was really dominated by anxiety. Pretty much in college, I used to have a lot of issues because I would be drinking caffeine. I'm not a coffee drinker, and I wasn't really into caffeine, but I'd go and I'd get a chai or I'd get a hot chocolate or something else after a night of drinking, and then I'd be going in and taking a quiz for my Latin class, and I would be sweating and panicking the whole time. And then I've also had issues where like I still have an anxiety with eating. I definitely think I have tendencies to fall into disordered eating, but this is just like anxiety I get in the middle of eating and I feel nauseous and can't finish the meal, or I'll have anxiety just out of nowhere and really have a difficult time figuring out why. So I'm just going to give you a few things that have helped me a lot. Caffeine, number one, get rid of it. I think I didn't give advice, but somebody was asking for tips for morning anxiety, one of my friends. And it really got me thinking when I saw a whole bunch of other people respond. I was like, oh my God, like a lot of people have issues with caffeine when they have anxiety. So number one, get rid of your caffeine. You can switch to something with lower caffeine or no caffeine, or just moderate your intake. It will help so much. I really promise you. Another thing, the other side of it, talking about like downers, alcohol, limit your intake. Don't binge drink because it will really mess with your hormones and your brain chemistry. And when you wake up hungover, you can have a big crash and it can either cause you to be depressed or anxious or one or the other, and among other problems. So just bear in mind that this will help you out if you limit both of those things. And then finally, I would say exercise. Running is very therapeutic, and other people in the anxiety community agree with me on this. Just getting out there, running, finding something rhythmic, getting your body, getting those good hormones back up and those good chemicals in your brain back up so that you can kind of be more plateaued without these spikes of having extreme anxiety and panic to situations. And then I would just say, finally, if you're having a hard time with anxiety, talk to a therapist if you're not already talking to one. Maybe medication would be a good route for you, but discuss that with your medical provider. And so those are like my big 3 things I tell people when they're struggling with anxiety. A lot of other people will suggest like meditation, guided meditation apps, maybe doing things you enjoy. Oh, so that's just to like lessen anxiety, but something that really helps me is breathing exercises when I'm having a panic attack. And you can look up all kinds of things that can actually guide you through these breathing exercises, or you learn how to do them on your own. I would definitely say I am not a professional. I am not a licensed therapist, so take all of my advice with a grain of salt. Everything is obviously going to be tailored to you and what works best with your body. And that goes for medication too. So keep that in mind. And if you want to submit a request for advice, all you have to do is go to my Instagram profile, go to the link in bio, and click right there. And there's an anonymous Google form that you can fill out and ask for advice. So anything is a good topic for advice, and don't feel afraid to reach out, because I really can't find out who you are. And even with my friends, I don't know who the fuck submitting any of these, if they are my friends or if they're listeners who are also my friends by extension. Maybe I just haven't met you before, or haven't met you yet, which I'd love to meet all of you. So just keep that in mind. So let's get on over to the hot take. And if you're like, oh, Bobbie, you're going so fast. It's like, yeah, because I am really trying to put the focus on the interview this time and, value your time too, right? That's what we always talk about. Okay, so let's do it. Now introducing, again, hot takes. So every week, this is basically maybe the only political part of my podcast. Other things I talk about, I don't know. If you find them political, maybe the issue lies with you. But this is maybe the only part, and it's mostly intended to be like either a, haha, I can't believe this person said this, or, oh my god, I can't believe this person actually said this. So we basically just find stuff online. Feel free to submit the stupid stuff you see online to me also. pettydaydreams@gmail.com. I've kept it simple for you. Just send me a screenshot. I won't share names if it's obvious that it's somebody we know or somebody personal. But if it's on Twitter or something like that, it's kind of fair game. So there's been a lot going on. Okay, fires out in California, Trump boat sinking, which was, oh my god, hilarious. My mom actually saw one sinking at Lake Travis. And I think we're all a little bit stressed out, as we have been. I don't even know what month of COVID this is, pandemic. But I've got a couple things for you today. So the first one was, we're still discussing kneeling in athletics. So basically this post was an exploration of why this person does not support kneeling during the, when the flag is flown, or when the Pledge of Allegiance or the Star Spangled Banner or any of that stuff is done. It was like this long paragraph. But the comments, guys, never go to the comments, I guess, because then you'll just lose your faith in humanity if you had any to begin with. But it was all like, I'm not gonna... It was like, I fought for that flag. I can't believe they're kneeling. How disrespectful to the people that defended our country. All this stuff. And then they're like sharing stuff like, one nation, under God. And I'm like, oh. So, we've got protests, all right? So, people have issues with that. And then they love to call them, conveniently, looting and rioting. And we're still having this issue with what? They're peacefully protesting on live television, and just because you don't have authority over their body when they're doing that, you're fucking pissed about it. Like, that's, I think, part of where this mindset comes from, guys, is that they're mad that they're, paying for cable? Like, they're not even really, I guess, merchandise and stuff like that is a way you directly contribute to these athletes' pay. But really, it's sponsorship. It's all these other things, advertisers. So I'm just kind of wondering, guys, why do people think they have any say in what these individuals do in any way? People, it's just convenient, It's very convenient of them. But, we've come full circle. So they were like, well, you didn't like when people are kneeling. Apparently, they still don't like when people are kneeling. They think it's disrespectful. They think it's all these things. Let me tell you about a little thing called nationalism. Okay? Blind nationalism is how we got Hitler. It's a little bit how we got Trump, if you want to go that far. It's this idea that your country's infallible. that its image needs to be protected at all costs, that anybody that's has a dissenting opinion is like, well, some of these commenters think they should be killed or go to hell. So it goes that extreme. But this is a problem, okay? And you see it a lot in these posts. But I'm going to get back around to one comment that stuck out to me in particular to show you how idiotic a lot of these people are. So it's a guy. He's got a smiling picture, so I'm surprised it's not like a below the chin selfie. Smiling picture with a hat on. He said, the NBA is nothing but assholes. So let me break that down for you. NBA, an acronym, turned into nothing but assholes, because he's clever, I guess. And to add to that, go to hell, NFL, and MLB, simply not worth mentioning. And somebody else said, NFL equals no fans left. MLB equals might leave Bassinet. Bunch of freaking crybabies. I think I lost some brain cells going through this comment section. I was like, well, this is an opportunity. I can find some stuff that might be useful. But you've probably heard it all before. It's just dumb, guys. Like, I don't know how much more civil they want protests to be, but kneeling during sporting events is about as civil as it gets. Silent, nonviolent protest. And they still have an issue with it. So who is the problem really? Who is really the problem here? On another note, slightly more comical, didn't we all love when boats were sinking because they didn't know how to properly drive boats in a parade on a lake, which boat parades already, like, really. But we've all seen the pictures and stuff. I thought this was so fucking funny. So it says, it's a tweet and it's in response to something else, but it said, conservatives think the left knows how to waterbend. I was like, okay, you have my attention. And this was a tweet from somebody. They are verified, which, okay, I guess this person gets verified, but I don't, okay. The likelihood of all these boats sinking at the Trump boat parade by accident is microscopic. We are dealing with terrorists. I cannot tell you how hard I laughed. Isn't that convenient? Like, you have all these flags, you have boats overloaded with people, you have boats going into the giant wake of a boat in front of them. Then it, becomes this, like, domino effect, and it's got to be terrorists, right? Right? I mean, that's, like, what a true patriot would say. And then they'd say it's a Dem hoax or something like that, too, right? But I could not believe this. I was like, oh, my God. And then on a related note, it's that guy sticking his own stick into his spokes on his bicycle and falling over, but it's basically 3 frames. So it says Trump water parade. Next frame, causing a wake big enough to sink their own boats. And then falling on the ground, holding their knee. Fucking terrorists. So yeah, that's basically it. You caused your own problem. You look like idiots. And yeah, that will never really sink in for any of these people. So anyhow, if you just disagree with me because you don't believe in my politics, I would love to have a civil discussion with you, but keep it to Facebook so that I never see it and never really have to deal with the arguments that never get any better. They never get any more convincing or valid. So anyhow, that's all I have for you guys today. Hope you enjoyed it. Interview, bomb, hot takes, introduction, very quick. I'll give myself 10 out of 10 for that because I'm long-winded. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. Share it with your friends. Give me some feedback. Give me a positive review on Apple. I will accept nothing less. I'm just kidding. But, if you have an issue with me, let me know. Let's talk about it before you tank my reviews. Anyway, so that's all I have. Let's wrap it up. Let's get to that fun music you love, right? Does anybody actually even make it to the end? The music I use throughout this episode and throughout every episode is Bright Side by Evan Schaefer. Thanks, you cool dude. Love the music you made. And yeah, so stay petty.